We have with us three eminent panelists who have also partly authored this new document. Before I introduce my panelists and start the program, I would like to put in a few ground rules. I request all participants to keep their mics and videos off so that more people can participate and good bandwidth is available for recording. I have a special request for the panelists. Please keep your video and mic on during the introduction, and later as you start, the other two can put it off, and post the first hour session, then we can all come back together. I once again welcome all of you to this very interesting webinar hosted by the Mysore School of Architecture. I have with me three eminent panelists: Dr. A. SRIVATHSAN, architect, urban designer, academician, and journalist. He is the ex-director, Center for Research, Architecture and Urbanism at CEPT, Ahmedabad. Ex-academic council director of the university and a very well-known senior journalist at the Hindu. I welcome Dr. SRIVATHSAN. Next on the panel, Dr. SRIVATHSAN, can you come on your video once?
Yeah, I'm on my video. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Next on our panel, we have Professor PUSHKAR KANVINDE, Member, Council of Architecture, architect, urban designer, and academician, former professor and head of BKPS College of Architecture, founder director of NIASA, now known as the Council of Architecture TRC, from 2005 to 2008, is a member of FEED, Forum for Exchange and Excellence in Design. Welcome, Professor PUSHKAR KANVINDE.
Thank you and good
Our
afternoon.
third eminent panelist, Dr. BINUMOL TOM, conservation architect and academician, Dean for Undergraduate Studies, and Professor, Department of Architecture, Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Technology, Kollam. She has a PhD in architecture, a master's in architectural conservation. Welcome, Dr. BINUMOL TOM.
Good afternoon, sir.
Very good afternoon. Welcome. I welcome all the three panelists, and I now start the main program. I want to request Dr. SRIVATHSAN to take over and speak about NEP 2020 and its effect on architectural education. Over to you, Dr. SRIVATHSAN.
Thank you, Ramakrishna Rao. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation today. I'm particularly happy to be along with PUSHKAR KANVINDE and BINUMOL TOM, two people who have been actively working on many important documents drafted by Council, and particularly the subject matter of today, which is the minimum standards, which most of us would have by this time received and looked at. Ever since the draft NEP, or the National Education Policy, was released, I've been sort of closely following it, and particularly looking at what it means to architectural education. As someone who has taught for many decades and also administered a university that specializes on architectural education along with other habitat studies, I find this document as one of the most significant documents, policy documents in recent times. To me, in a way, it could also be a watershed moment, because what it opens as possibilities or opportunities are immense. Of course, indeed, it has its own problems that comes along with it that we also have to engage. But I'm here to now look at what it is going to do, or what it could do for us, which much depends on how we take this forward. Okay, so I have a short presentation. I keep it shorter and directly get to the features of the NEP and spend some time on what it or how it could impact architectural education. So let me just start my presentation here. So are you able to, it's on the screen? Okay. Okay.
Yes, it is visible.
Yeah. So let me just take a few minutes to lay the ground condition before we get to the NEP. Most of us here were involved in academic education in one way or the other. We know that often we face many challenges, and I've categorized them into four types. We often find regulatory challenge, both within our own institutions of teaching or when we travel outside. And often we say, or we hear, that but for the regulatory conditions, sometimes stifling too, we would have probably innovated extensively. We would have got more creative with our curriculum. Probably we could have produced different kinds of educational focus. In that sense, probably produced different kinds of architects which this country needs. And there are multiple regulations, and there's often confusion as to who oversees what, and sometimes the university says something, the council has something else to say, and so on. The second challenge that we face is the pedagogic challenge. Most of us have this great urge to contextualize what we are teaching, make it relevant to the times that we are working, and also produce architects who would sort of creatively build on the knowledge that exists, the knowledge base that exists, and sort of build on that. But we know, and we often again face a problem that most of the education formats across the country is painted with the same flat brush. Okay, the curriculum is more or less the same, the pedagogic methods, and it's not that one is not aware of this problem, but there are certain kind of externalities and sometimes internal problems that we're not able to innovate on our pedagogy. In fact, my brief study about the history of architectural education in this country, I was very surprised to find some things that we were talking in 1959 when Parlekar, in that famous seminar on architecture organized by KANVINDE and attended by Nehru in the 55 Lalit Kala, what he speaks seems to sort of continue to resonate or be in our presence. So we're not able to do much for various reasons. The third challenge that we face is the institutional challenge. We often have imagined our institutions to be very stable. In fact, the academic environment is considered as the most stable, which sometimes means not much happens and changes. Our imagination of what is infrastructure or our learning environment is also static. But increasingly we are finding, particularly post this pandemic, the importance of a campus learning environment has come through significantly. We know, despite all our best efforts to teach online, there is something that a great learning experience can do. And we now look at institution as a community of learners. Okay, so but we are not all of us are fortunate, or not all of us have the resources, or there can be other issues that sort of poses a challenge for our learning experience. The last challenge that we face, which we seldom talk but needs to be talked, is the economics of education. Okay, the notion of private college being autonomous is a misnomer. Every aspect of our education is regulated, and the most important of all is the fee. What does it cost to teach an architect? How much are we charging? How much can we charge? Now, if we have to meet the council standards, we did in a university I'm part of, we did a quick calculation to see what it would cost if you really want to meet the standards and go beyond that. It would cost us about 2 lakhs plus if you really want some great standards. And if you want to build on further, we need to pay more. And this cost is going to only increase with the years, because not only inflation costs, but generally other kinds of increase in costs. On the other end of the stick, what is the architect paid, a graduate? How does it influence the cost of education? There are some degrees for which students are willing to pay 15 lakhs and 20 lakhs per year. That's because they're able to get commensurate remuneration. So going forward, what would this mean to us? Because increasingly, please bear in mind, education is going to be in the private sector. The state's involvement in providing higher education would be limited to a bunch of institutions. Now, keeping this in background, I would like you to look at what the NEP offers. Now, there are many things in NEP. I'm just categorizing the salient features of NEP into 6 columns. First is the institutional changes that NEP proposes. All institutions will be divided into 3 kinds. One would be a research intensive university, another one would be teaching, or it could be both, and there will be multidisciplinary colleges. The concept of affiliated colleges is going to go. In fact, in the draft NEP policy, it said from 2020, no permission will be given for affiliative colleges. The imagination of the government is we are looking at autonomous degree-giving colleges or university. And currently, they're going to keep a cap on affiliation up to 300. So one is a large autonomous, second is a large multidisciplinary universities. The concern of the policy is that the current higher education is highly fragmented and there are many small single program colleges. I forget the numbers, which they've stated in the report. And the government thinks that this is problematic because we are not able to make connections across programs. And 2, the colleges are not able to expand and provide the investment that is needed to deliver good quality education. Now, there's not going to be any, and the minimum enrollment, the NEP is looking for a college or university is about 3,000. This is far less than what it was first proposed, which is around 5 to 25,000. Now, what does it mean to small colleges? Will small colleges exist? What happens to colleges which offer 1 or 2 programs with a strength of 750 or 500? We'll come to that later. Now, there was initially a proposal to have off-campuses and multi-campuses across the country. Because, you know, universities are bound by the state university, and unless you are created by a central act, you can't possibly have campuses across the country. But the draft initially allowed campuses across the country, but it's been withheld. But I think it's only a matter of time. It'll come back. The last point is to have a large public higher education institute in every district, which will be government funded. And that's absolutely important to make education accessible and improve or increase the enrollment. That's one of the significant objectives of the NEP. And it means a lot. Imagine an IIT or an SPA in every district. I'm just imagining, for the sake of argument. So what kind of a competitive environment that it would produce for other kinds of colleges in a very positive way. The second column that we need to look at in terms of NEP is what is the NEP's proposals for teaching and research. First, it says most of the undergraduate program could be either 3 or 4-year UG programs. Okay, now a 3-year UG program would be liberal, while a 4-year program may lead to a research. I know council do not agree with this. We'll come to that later, and what would how council may view this and how to go forward. That's a separate point. We'll take it up later. Now, what is interesting to me is the third point, which is now there's an integrated postgraduate program, which means 5 years of PG with if you're doing a 3 years UG, or a 1-year PG if you're doing 4 years UG. To me, this allows to imagine some of the interesting models of architectural education that's available abroad. For instance, I'm familiar with the models available in UK, where you provide a 3-year basic foundational liberal architectural education. which is not the professional degree. Okay, then you do a 2-year degree, which is basically this professionalization degree, and is a specialized education, and that's more or less your first professional degree. And after that, you do a licensing exam. So this allows for a sort of a core education, which is the first 3, and 2 years of specialization, and subsequently of 2 years or in between 2 years of work experience that leads to a licensing exam. Okay, that's the model, and that has created tremendous alternatives, streams, and different choices for students. Currently in our system, that's not possible. Now, the government wants, the policy wants the bridge between education and practice to reduce, which is a good thing, and particularly in architecture, we are looking at it. The next point is there's a flexible curricular structure, choice-based curriculum. Some of the universities have already implemented it, but this is going to be the way forward. So this you'll have to see also along with the earlier 3+2 models. And even within the 3 years and within the 2 years, there could be more choices. There's a multiple entry and exit. That entry has been removed. Earlier it was in the draft, but exit points you have. For instance, if you exit out of the first year, you'll become a diploma, certificate, second year diploma, third year degree, etc. And currently 2 universities, 2 institutions in India, which is SPA Delhi and CEPT, always as an exit point or a program in the third year BArch, which the new document from council also supports. Now that the education, PG education to connect with professional practice, that was in the draft, it's not seen in the final report. Well, the student faculty ratio that is recommended is 10:1, up between 10 students to 1 teacher, or 20 students to 1 teacher. Okay, the architects may have a different view. I'll probably take it up in my last slide, this presentation. ODL is open and distance learning. That's online courses and executive programs. There's tremendous support for it because the policy sees that as one of the major ways in which to increase enrollment. And institutions that are accredited will also be allowed to do ODL courses. Now the next column is the regulatory column. Now UGC, etc., all of them will go, and in its place you will have the National Higher Education Regulatory Authority, which will be the sole regulator. Okay. But the institutions will have full autonomy in terms of academics, in terms of finance, in terms of the degree giving capacity. And the education will be entirely the concern of the universities, which is probably the most important thing to have happened in recent times. Now, under this framework, bodies such as Council of Architecture, ASCT, etc., will no more have a regulatory function in that sense, which will be part of what is called the professional standard setting body. So they would recommend what are the desirable standards, produce framework, and etc. And they'll be part of what is called the General Education Council. But they would not, let me repeat, they would not be sort of regulating education as they are doing now. Now, initially there was this recommendation of making compulsory all of the colleges to get into accreditation by 2030 and do it once in 5 years, but that's not there. But there is a clear indication that going forward, instead of the current inspection and licensing kind of a regime, we would move more towards a binary accreditation. Binary accreditation meaning there is no graded accreditation. Either you're qualified to be a good quality institute or you're not. It's an yes or a no. It's something like some of the institutions have I pass or fail. Either you get 65% and you're I pass or you fail. So that's the binary accreditation. And NAC would be the top accreditator, and it will license it to different qualified institutes to carry out. There were in the draft other ideas, which is not there in the program, in the final draft, which is like the program accreditation is voluntary, but institutional accreditation is necessary. But we don't know what it will happen, but they may come back later. Now, let me just go to the next slide. Now, there is a lot of scope for internationalization. There will be ease of entry of international students, much more, because this is something which is another ambition of the government, that how you create the country or make the country into a knowledge hub. How you attract, if the quality is good, wouldn't we attract quality students from abroad? So there is, as a beginning towards that, the ease of entry for international students. Initially, they had said it would be 15% supernumerary, but that's not there in the final draft. And select international universities that in the top 100 ranked list of QS, or I don't know, maybe QS or Times Higher Education list, will probably allow to be set, they would be allowed to set up campuses. Currently, there is a provision, but that is so difficult and not many are interested. And Indian universities can also set up campuses in select countries. And on the long run, transfer of credits between the countries and different institutions across countries will be permitted. Now, recruitment, this is a very interesting move. Now, there will not be any flat governing norm in terms of recruitment, payment, promotion, etc. But each institution has to put out what is called an institutional development plan, which hopefully will be in public view. And they will state what is their objective, what are their recruiting norms, what is the scale of pay. Now, this is opening up an entirely a different sort of, it's going to affect the landscape of recruitment. I'll explain that in my next concluding slide. Now, the last bit is while there is an increased investment in education, most of it is going to public institutions. Private institutions have to arrange for their own funding, and fees will be left to institutions to fix. Okay. Now, this is what I explained in the previous slide, is something that's of concern for most of us. Because what is the threshold of the fees after which certain kind of education becomes not more attractive? Because the rule of thumb is that you have to recover your cost of education within 3 years. In architecture, you need at least 10 years to do that. So that is something for us to think about, particularly those in the private sector. And there is a reference in the policy to PPP model. There's no detail here. I'm assuming something like the government may provide land and private institutions could run it, or there could be an equal partner arrangement, etc. Some of the severe restrictions, which I thought were silly in the draft, have been removed. For example, it says that 25% of your revenue alone should be used for expenses, which means your salary bill itself is about 50% of your revenue minimum. It would be an absolute and unviable proposition, but that has been removed. And there is a lot of focus to making education affordable, and 50% of students will get fee waivers and so on. And the National Research Fund will be set up, and that will be open to both public and private institutions to get money. Now, let me come to the last slide, which is basically what are the possible scenarios if this thing comes through, which I think it's going to come through, because if you look at the seriousness with which ministers and prime minister are making statements and how it's been sort of very quickly rolled out, it's not really one of those policies that sometimes we think will disappear. This is something here to stay, and its consequences will be felt by us. So what does it mean to us, architecture educators and institution managers? One, now there will be no excuse, I think. Often, this is my personal view, I often think most colleges which are inspected and given council recognition, which is based on primarily inputs, which are what is your room, what is your infrastructure, do you have enough teachers, etc. And seldom, though we do, I myself have visited many colleges, we do look at work, it's not a serious introspection or inspection of the work. It's broadly what the objective standards are, which is in terms of inputs. Now that gives us false sense of quality. All council accredited institutions are the same, but that's not true, we know. So how do a student know which is a better school and which it is not? How would a parent know? Now, accreditation is not in full swing. So to me, uh, this opens up a complete new ground where an institution can no more give any excuse. They cannot say, I'm following council's curriculum or I'm going by what someone else says. So we own up what we are teaching, and our quality, we are responsible for our quality. And we can devise a curriculum as we see fit. For example, I'm a college in the midst of many building artisans. I'm in Kutch, let's say, for instance. I want to completely ground my education in a very regional way. That's a choice one can make, but one needn't make. But if one decides to make, such a curriculum is possible now. Now, with multiple entry and exits, to me, it's absolutely a good move. Because one, I've always seen going forward in future, there's going to be an age-free learning. Why should everyone do the usual 12 plus 5 plus 2 and so on? Why can't someone take a break here, work, gain experience, etc.? Sometimes as students become independent and the cost becomes higher, probably they want to work and make some money and come back and pay their fees. Probably the modular way of doing things. For instance, let's say I have a semester of 40 credits. 20 credits and a year of 40 credits. I want to do only one studio and one course a semester. Either I have the time or I don't have the money. Particularly if in PG, when practicing architects want to do it in a modular way and a flexible way. Current setup does not allow. That's absolutely possible now if this comes through. As I explained in the previous case, we'll have a core and a choice-based specialization. Because we know there are certain trained skills and capabilities and knowledge base are common to many design streams, which will form the core, which probably takes 3 years. But later I choose to focus on, let's say, interior, or I may choose to focus on large-scale infrastructure projects or something like that. So there is a core and a specialization possible. Okay. Now, in terms of program, both UG and PG can be completely reworked. And we can learn in multiple ways. One of the interesting models in recent times has been, let's say, this school in London called the London School of Architecture, where it's a postgraduate program. There are 20 firms who are partners in the institution, where the first semester of the design happens in these 20 firms. And they do work, these projects that are carried out in these 20 firms. And the reviews are held by the institution and the 20 firms together in different office spaces. It allows students to completely ground in the real life, real world problems. These possibilities are now possible. What is the purpose? It also allows us to think about the purpose of teaching. More important, the student experience will count. What does the student want, particularly in postgraduate education? Does he want a research experience? Does she want a completely grounded in professional experience? How do we do? And in this case, we'll hopefully have more value for professionals. We do, unlike other streams of education, architecture is closely tied to professionals, but much more. Can they be given professional professor status with different contractual agreements and so on? Those will be, for those of us who are in the institution would know, the council's norms of 1:10 or 1:10, whichever we choose to adopt, imposes enormous economic difficulty because we insist that a practicing architect must teach design, but the person will be counted only as a visiting faculty. Okay? So an institution has to invest apart from the 29 or 49, whatever faculty requires, and even more invest in inviting professionals from outside. So it skews the economics of the education. So there has to be a lot more rethinking in the way we integrate professionals, not only in terms of visiting studio crits, etc., but also the manner we accord status and integrate them in terms of finances. Our program has to be benchmarking international because we are forcing phenomenal competition. So how would we measure and what sort of a quality was expected out of academic institutions? So it'll be our concern. The next point is how do we position ourselves? Are we a teaching institute? Are we research? Are we combining both? If you're doing research, do we have enough resources? Are we trained? Our programs are developing towards that? Do we have substantial workshops, labs, etc.? So each institution have to carefully think as to how they want to position. And in relation to that, it requires its infrastructure, which means anyone who comes to accredit the institution would have to first know what is the orientation and the position of the institution. And only in relation to that can any kind of evaluation can be done. And as it so by opening up and making quality and entirely the responsibility of the institution, I foresee an healthy competition, which means we are doing well, but we'll do better. We'll be on our toes, and students will have more choices to make. And this internationalization is going to be a real thing in the future, and there's something, probably it will be a positive disruption. Now, my last point, the finance, which the fee-based revenue model will continue because, as I said, the funds are not going to come to private college. Now, that is going to be the biggest challenge. How do we keep the cost of education accessible? In my assessment, coming from the university, for the 5 years, been administering it academically, you need a corpus of roughly 100 to 200 crores if you really want to run a 2,500 sort of a universities or a college to keep the cost lower. We are not IIMs or IITs with rich alums. We're not going to get large corporate donations. Without those corpuses, the cost of the education is going to be a difficult thing to manage. And second, this model is going to be precarious. Any fee-based model is going to be a precarious revenue model because without a certain number, which it looks in these days, 750 seems to be a magical number, just as we moved from 20 intake to 40 to 80. Because increasingly education is a fee-based model. The implications would be, unlike in present conditions, faculties will be paid different fees. For example, already you could see that the cost of running a design program is more expensive than cost of running an architecture program, because some of the top designer professionals to recruit is very expensive. Relatively, I'm saying, it's expensive. So the charges between the programs are going to be different. The charge of running an interior program would be different from an urban design program and so on. That would be the reality. Okay. I'll stop with this slide. Now, in this context, how do we go forward? I'm very happy to have both PUSHKAR, KANVINDE, and BINUMOL TOM here, because they have been very actively drafting many of these important documents that has a huge impact on us. But I'm sure going forward, some of these things have to be incorporated and reflected. There's not much choice that we have going forward. And I'm eagerly waiting to listen to both of you and as well as your other views in the question time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that.
Thank you, Dr. SRIVATHSAN. Excellent, and it raises many questions. One of which, you spoke about autonomy. You also spoke about economic thing. So what happens to standalone colleges? We can come back to that. I will now invite Professor PUSHKAR KANVINDE to talk to us about minimum standards of architectural education 2020, changes expected, and possibilities in academics and profession. Over to you, Professor PUSHKAR.
Thank you, Professor Rao. I trust I am audible. And I also have a presentation to make. I hope you are able to see this.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Able to see it.
Thank you, thank you. Just start the slideshow part. See, when we are talking about NEP and COA minimum standards, let me put forth some background and fact. The first thing is the NEP and COA minimum standards, even when both were published very close to each other in terms of time, have no connection whatsoever. NEP was drafted and the draft was published about a year and a half ago. COA minimum standards are being worked upon for more than a decade now, and I believe they were submitted to the MHRD, or what that time was called Ministry of Human Resource Development, sometimes almost 3 years ago. And that time NEP was just in discussion. So whatever standards were submitted had no connection with NEP, or not much cognizance was taken during this preparation of standards of NEP, because when they were originally drafted, NEP draft was not even published. Now, second thing is, even when NEP is accepted for current students who are already studying in second, third, fourth, fifth year, not much change is expected, because the change, I believe, will start from schools and also will percolate into higher education gradually. I think Professor SRIVATHSAN has, in great clarity and with great background study, presented the whole NEP in a very crisp manner. So I need not get into the details of it, but that's what it is. Now, similarly, MS, that is Minimum Standards 2020, may not even affect the current students directly, because it needs modifications in curriculum to be carried out to whatever university that college is attached to. Here I have used the term affiliating university, which will very slowly and in near future is likely to vanish, but it will take some time, and the colleges may not directly get autonomy. Till the time the current batches pass out, the affiliating thing may continue, and maybe the new batch, it can be from 2020 itself or 2021, can be attached to what is autonomous institution. Now, that provision for exit after 3 years is being discussed in newspapers and everywhere. Now, that also comes into effect only if that is put forth in the curriculum or the syllabus which is accepted by the institution or university. This provision is there in the minimum standards or council regulations for quite long, and in past the colleges or universities have offered this. For example, Punjab University is offering it for more than 2 decades or more than that now. Pune University offered it for almost 8 or 9 years, but closed it down because in those 8 or 9 years, not a single student opted exit after 3rd year. Now, that is what is, I believe, going to be the reality in future also, that not many students are going to opt to get out of architecture education if it remains like this after 3 years, but the things are likely to change. So what are the basic changes in minimum standards 2020? The first thing is the faculty student ratio, which was 1 to 8 in 1983 regulation, which is now changed to 1 to 10. That also was implemented for quite some years, but sometime about 4 or 5 years back, the interest of those people who were running the council got back into 1983 regulations, then whatever was being followed or draft regulation. But that is now accepted standards, 1 in 10. Even 1 in 10 ratio, people feel that it is very high, but for the time being, let it be 1 in 10. And the land requirements are now changed to the floor space requirements, because usually what we are interested in, how much floor space could be built on a particular piece of land. And previously it was quite simple that whatever is the area of the plot, you can build about 1-to-1 ratio or 0.75% of or 75% of the total land, which is now related to the floor space available or FSI which is available. Then there is more clarity in terms of what is the requirement of infrastructure and faculty, quite detailed out. And the changes in courses or subjects in view of this CBCS or choice-based credit system is also elaborated there. And looking at the fast addition of colleges and number of students undergoing the architecture education, another change that is really seen is the possibility of internship outside architects' offices. Because at one point, people in council realized that there are more number of students than possible of offices or practices who can absorb them as interns. So there was a thought how we can go ahead with such situation, and then it was opened that some students who have interest in working on sites or projects, some students who have interest in working on research projects in some NGOs who are doing architecture related research should also be offered, and that was also opened up. And then what is not addressed is the career advancement scheme, which many teachers have pointed out that they should have also addressed to the career advancement scheme, but I think it will come in later, because now with NEP coming in, many changes in 2020 minimum standards are expected, because the whole structure of architecture in itself may change in the responding to the NEP requirements. So what could be the way forward? Now we must put forth that Council of Architecture in an official communication to ministry, when it asked for response on NEP, had clearly requested that, like law and medicine, architecture is also another profession which should be kept out of scope of NEP, because we need very specialized training, and it's a long training, unlike many other vocations, I would say, but somehow government has not accepted it. Now, rather than looking at this as a setback, let us look at it as an opportunity, I would say, to establish supremacy of architecture education over others, keeping in mind these two very famous quotes, that architecture is mother of all arts and architecture begins where engineering ends. Now, what does it mean and what are the possible options? The options are many, but I will just try to put forth few scenarios, because it is impossible to put in all the possible scenarios, because nobody has even explored what possible scenarios could be there post NEP. Now, what is going to happen is there are going to be multidisciplinary higher education institutes, as Dr. SRIVATHSAN has already explained, that may offer many choices of learning. In the sense, we are talking about a person who is doing engineering may also opt for a course which is offered by a fashion technology stream in the same institute, or go for a course or a short course in dance along with maybe structural design. Now, all these kind of choices could be available. So we have to, our Council of Architecture has to choose that if one has to major into an architecture program which is further going to result into accepting him or registering him as an architect, what courses which will be offered by these institutions should be acceptable in terms of credits for an architecture program. Because not everything could be acceptable, but there could be some variations here and there, and maybe we can say that these, apart from these core architecture courses, you can take these peripheral courses or these parallel courses from other streams, because architecture, I believe, benefits from many courses in different arts, different crafts, different skills, different philosophies, etc. So the list could be large if we try to explore. Now, the 3-year or 4-year program leading to bachelor's degree, if it becomes a norm, then the International Charter UIA, which says that the professional degree in architecture should have a minimum duration of 5 years of training in architecture, may not come true. And like many other countries have already done, we may have to look at master's degree rather than bachelor as a professional degree from where one can seek registration with Council of Architecture and get into practice of architecture. Already, I believe UK, Canada, and even Australia, they already have this system that a professional degree is master's degree rather than a bachelor's degree. So we may also have to move in that direction. The programs, therefore, need to be carefully tailored, unfolded, and monitored as to how it is going on. And as Dr. SRIVATHSAN has already mentioned it, the approach of regulation must change from what is referred to as or currently practiced as input-based regulation to outcome-based regulation. That is, we have to monitor and check what is the competency, what is the preparedness of the candidate coming out of this course to enter into the profession of architecture. So what are the options? There could be hundreds of options. I am just trying to show graphically the 2 or 3 possible options. One is you have a foundation course in architecture, which also has possibility of electives added from different courses, which is of 3 or 4 years. It depends on institutions. Some institutions may have it 3 years, some institutions may offer 4 years. The subjects may vary. It can be, or it may be, I don't know, it may be followed by a practical experience or apprenticeship of 1 or 2 years, where the person gets into architect's office and works there for a while, and then decides how he is going to proceed further. Some of them may get into architecture for master's degree. Few others may diversify into interior, landscape architecture, building engineering management, various options of planning, urban design, or they may join a totally different stream, but related to buildings, like law related to real industry or realty industry, law related to land and buildings, management, design, and there could be many other courses where one can diversify. And if one does master's degree in architecture proper, core architecture, then he will be considered to get into profession. Now, there is always a question that if there is an exit option offered by architecture colleges after 3 years, will the person get registration with council? The clear answer is no. That is not considered as a professional degree, and a person with only 3 years exit degree from architecture course will not be accepted for registration unless he completes to the level which is accepted as a professional degree. Another kind of option is, rather than one course which is foundation in architecture, one may have a mix of courses which are offered by different streams. Maybe some courses offered by humanities or history streams, some may be offered skills or craft-based courses, visual arts, maybe some performing arts courses also, technology courses, design courses, or few other courses which we even cannot imagine at this point of time, that will come forth only when the things start unfolding. So all these could be the possible input after a small apprenticeship of 1 or 2 years, when one finally decides that, okay, he is fit for architecture and then therefore get into architecture course, then comes in for a 2 years master's degree program. And that can then be the possibility of qualification to enter the profession. Now, these are the only two options I have explained or tried to put forth. There could be many options, combination of these, and we have to only watch and see and explore what many different options could be available to get into architecture. Now, other aspects are what will be the role of Council of Architecture and what is going to happen. One is, as Professor Dr. SRIVATHSAN explained, the regulation will be through a central body, which will be a singular body regulating the all the streams whatsoever, and council will have no direct role in regulation. This regulation is expected to be light yet tight. That's what NEP explains it like. But the base for this regulation, certain base could be provided by Council of Architecture. Similarly, about accreditation, there will be one singular central accreditation board or authority, which may, I believe it is more likely that they will accredit programs rather than institutions, or it can be a dual system like what we have today, NAC accrediting the institutions and NBA or similar body accrediting the programs. But here again, council may only help set the criteria as to how the accreditation for architecture course could be done. Beyond that, council may not have any direct role in accreditation. As such, council will not have much control over what kind of students are getting in and what is the quality of the institution which is training them. Even the entrance test, they are saying that there will be only one common entrance test for all the courses and not an aptitude test like what it is today, which will be conducted by what is already established as a national testing agency. Council again may only suggest profile of the candidate who can possibly get into architecture. So the role of council is that of a professional standard setting board, and this is where the core role will be. It can put forth that we are looking for this qualities, this learning, this competency, and this maturity of a person who is coming to us to be registered as an architect. And possibly there will be therefore examination for registration as an architect, which is common in many countries, that after you complete and reach the professional degree, whatever it is, it could be 5 years B.Arch or 5 or 6 years M.Arch degree whatsoever. After possessing that degree and the required credits which are put forth as a professional standard setting board, the person will be eligible to appear for the examination for registration as an architect. This is possible change that may come forth. Now, I have some apprehensions also. Now, in my mind, the implementation of the policy is still a question mark, because previously 2-3 such policies were discussed and not much was implemented. One of the reasons is the politicians and bureaucrats don't like to grant autonomy to any other agency. They feel they are the only autonomous. And so right since Kothari Commission, the discussion about granting autonomy to higher education institutions is being discussed. It is proposed by the committee, but never got implemented. And they don't like, as I say, for example, amongst the councils, Council of Architecture, by virtue of the provisions in Architects Act, I believe is the most autonomous of the councils which exist, and therefore most disliked in the government portals. That Council of Architecture is something which we don't like because we have no say in what or how the council functions. That is the grudge of politicians and bureaucrats. So I'm not very sure whether the kind of autonomy expected by Dr. Kasturi Rangan and his colleagues will be actually granted finally by politicians and bureaucrats. Let's hope for the betterment of this nation and the education system, they accept and grant that kind of autonomy. Then there is no very clear path, which was earlier there in the draft NEP. In the final, that path is somehow not very clear as to how the NEP will be implemented, what will be the goals and what will be the milestones, that is not mentioned anywhere. Then there is a question mark about this minimum enrollment of 3,000, particularly when it comes to older institutions and with limited physical infrastructure. For example, the institution like Sir J.J. College of Art and Architecture, NIDs, SPAs, IIMs, they don't have the kind of infrastructure to expand to accept 3,000 enrollment. So what will happen to this? Will they be clustered with some other institutions? That we have to wait and see the government policy as to how it comes forth. Similarly, as Dr. SRIVATHSAN also explained, the financially it will move into a system which is quite like in many developed countries, that there will be the average person will not be able to directly afford the higher education. So there will be number of skill-based or vocational courses offered at entry level at passing 12th standard, and maybe the person will take some such course which is 1 or 2 years duration and get into employment, earn enough money to support him through the higher education, and then join the higher education institution at a later stage, which is very common in the US, UK, and many other developed countries, that after 12th, you don't get any support from parents, so you earn yourself enough money to support your higher education, and only then you get into higher education. So the same system may come in India if the fees become very high. And then last thing is, there will be resistance from existing teachers and universities who always are resistant to any change whatsoever. That is the typical mentality of many teachers and university employees, except maybe few courses. But in general courses, they are not very open to the changes. So that resistance is also likely to be there. But let's hope that these sweeping changes, which are dream changes for a nation, will come forth, and even architecture education will come out stronger when it comes to implementation of NEP. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pushkar. Interestingly, way back in the 40s and 30s, Banaras Hindu University offered a joint degree in mechanical and electrical engineering by extra adding 1 more year. And a great
that was
amount
also
of,
being discussed here.
Yeah, and a
that
great
was also
amount
being
of.
Discussed.
I'm so glad, because a great amount of pioneers came out doing both these degrees together. Also, another quick thought, that like in the US, after you do all your courses wherever, to be able to practice as an architect, you have to write examinations. Would just give that a thought, and we can come back. I now welcome, thank you so much, Professor Pushkar. I now welcome Dr. BINUMOL TOM and request her to speak about NEP 2020, changes that can be brought about in architect education with respect to curriculum. Over to you, Dr. BINUMOL.
Thank you, Ramakrishna Rao, sir. At the onset, let me thank Mysore School of Architecture for providing me an opportunity to be amidst you, especially with the two stalwarts of architectural education, SRIVATHSAN sir and PUSHKAR sir. I would like to start from where PUSHKAR sir ended, the apprehensions on NEP and our changing scenario. I also have a presentation to share. Just a minute. I'm trying to share my presentation. Oh, 1 minute.
Sandeep, can you assist?
Yeah, I'm just doing it. Yeah.
Okay, right.
Can you just tell me whether it's visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you so much. To start with, the first statement that has really gone to my heart about NEP is the policy plans to develop good human beings who are capable of rational thought and action. These three words, good, rational thought, and action, somehow pierced into my heart because of a very personal experience I had in Kerala. Just take a few minutes of yours to explain that agony of an architecture teacher. You all know that in 2018 and 19, 2 consecutive years, we had severe floods. 2018, the flood was really severe. Maybe that was, for the past 100 years, we never had encountered such a severe flood. And 2019 also, but not to the level of 2018. So both the times, we had various discussions about how a school of architecture can support the rebuilding programs post facto, just after the disaster, what kind of relief activities that we could work out. But every time the discussions ended with drawing plans, yes, fine, but that takes a long time for the government to approve and get it done. But as an immediate affair, what could the students do, or the teachers and students could together do, was just like any other ordinary school or business school where, collect some stationery, collect money, pay them in cash or kind. So that has put me into a lot of distress, thinking like architecture being one of the most important professional courses, the outcome is again, we are working like the normal, students of other courses. So I felt that there is a change that is required, and maybe a few thoughts were there in mind. And every time it's like, it's like a horse tied to a chair. A horse has got immense capacity, very energetic, fiercely energetic, in fact. But when it is tied, when it is chained, it feels that, okay, I am chained. These policies and all those minimum standards are chaining me, so I cannot move ahead. Without knowing that the chair to which the horse is chained is only a plastic one, which the wink of an eye and the shift of the head, it can just come along with the horse. It's just a allegory that I'm trying to say. And this thought of having a new education policy for the country, as well as how it would affect architecture curriculum, in fact, took us again to study how architecture was taught historically. And as we all know, architecture was learned through guild systems, basically the Guru Shishya Parampara, where Guru identifies what are the capabilities of students and then classify them and then provide them with those knowledge and skill that that particular student is capable of, and also assessing the attitude and aptitude of the student. And it was always skill based. But because of our modern system of education, this was not happening. We just moved ahead from the Guru Shishya Parampara to the paper degrees of teachers lecturing in class and getting degrees, students writing the exam and getting degrees. And in this light, while discussions on NEP and minimum standards happened, I thought this BOHO system, or BOHO school of thought, has got lots to tell us. And I'm sure you must be wondering, when the country is leaping towards artificial intelligence and robotics and Internet of Things, what am I going to say about BOHO system of schooling? The basic elementary factor about this BOHO school of thought was there was a basic course which many students could do, and then once you excel in the basic course, you can move into the next level where you specialize in certain aspects or certain curriculum, and then that also can fetch you a job. Or again, you move towards a higher level where, very specific for BOHO school of thought, it was on a study on specific material like glass, clay, stone, wood, metal. And finally, the highest level of understanding is about building, because BOHO school of thought believed that building itself was the zenith of all design, and their students had to focus on artistry as well as crafts across all mediums of design. So basically, it was focused on taught the students to eliminate certain ideas of individual and then moving collectively. And the best thing about BOHO school of thought was that something similar to what even NEP has to offer us is BOHO school of thought had various disciplines under one roof: the painting, architecture, furniture design, typography, though design was almost given more importance than fine arts. So I was just trying to find what are the hidden opportunities. A few of them have already been spoken by PUSHKAR sir and SRIVATHSAN sir. See, NEP 2020 envisages a center of excellence, an institution, not a standalone college of architecture. It's a center of excellence which has got facilities and courses and faculty members to learn and teach all liberal arts like humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, mathematics, fine arts, everything. You just mentioned sculpture, painting, literature, music, performing arts, filmmaking, engineering, building material sciences, both conventional and new. So it is everything under one umbrella so that each course can borrow and give from each other. In fact, just look at all the courses that have been taught in our country. Architecture alone is the total fit into all this because we borrow a lot. We, as Pushkar sir rightly said, with architecture is, it's a, mother of all arts. We borrow in our architectural education, knowingly, unknowingly, various aspects from all these fields of studies like humanities, ranging from humanities to music, to performing arts, to engineering and building materials and science. So I think this is a very jubilant moment for us to see what are the hidden opportunities that we have to our education system, architecture education system to a higher level, and also forgoing all those unhappiness of not being able to contribute to the society in times of calamity. But the biggest challenge again comes from what we have been trained, like the horse tied to the chair. We have certain norms to follow, but again, there is a hidden possibility in this. We have always been teaching, or at least for the past 5-6 years, we have been looking into outcome-based education. And we have also found that there are certain things that could be measurable in outcome-based education. Now it is time to check the outcome-based education and see whether the student, out of not every course, but at least 50% of the courses that we have taught, the students have acquired a skill which he could use if he requires to take up a job in between or after, other than just being a designer of built structure or built environment. So this is where the whole challenge as well as the whole energy to be worked upon. How do we convert our courses? Because in MS 2020, it's read that we have professional core courses, which is the main mandatory courses. Then we have building services and applied engineering science courses, again mandatory. We have some skill-based courses, again mandatory, and we have a set of elective. And I just recollect what SRIVATHSAN sir had said in the beginning of his talk, where you are having a school in Kutch. Then there are certain local arts and crafts which could be taught along with the whole, the whole scenario of learning architecture. And because you are studying in that region, you get to understand that art and craft, and also become an apostle to promote that art and craft. Thereby, we can actually produce a lot of knowledge. I mean, reproduce a lot of indigenous knowledge and revive the traditional knowledge systems as and how we go about with our higher education. Again, as it has already been described, the 1-year certificate course, 2-year advanced diploma course, etc., etc. As Pushkar sir rightly said, professional course, architecture being a professional course, it has to have a 5-year duration. But what skills you learn in between? Again, taking you back to the Bauhaus school of thought, many things the students are inclined to, they are talented in, can be looked at this stage. Like for example, a student who has been taught how to make glasses, objects out of glass, the making, the shaping, the blowing, the coloring of glass, and that institution has got a TBI or an incubation center which creates and which develops and which can also market these products. Obviously, the whole concept of make in India, it can even become make in Kerala, or make in Tamil Nadu, make in Karnataka, and then revive and also create geographical index tags because of those cultural patterns that we have followed, and reviving them. And along with the course, the subjects that have been mentioned in our minimum standards 2020, I feel that there are a few things that have been missing, because if we are looking at NEP as a very holistic policy, which brings in all the multidisciplinary subjects together under one umbrella, there should be more stress on learning and teaching universal human value, the right understanding and the right value education. So that can also be included, because now the freedom is with universities. Now the freedom is with cluster colleges. So we can bring in this universal human values, which anyway is being taught at a school level, but it has to be carried over to the college level also. Then in addition, gender studies, because like how do, being architects and being the creators of built environment, how many of us have really looked at how women and transgenders, I'm not comparing them, I'm saying the other genders, how do they feel, experience the spaces that we have built in our cities and our rural areas? So that has never been a point of debate in any of our architectural curriculum, while or rather they are equally important as the male counterpart. So this kind of gender studies, looking at how women see cities, I'm sure you would be saying that I'm biased being a woman, but that is also an important criteria that we need to include in our curriculum. And obviously social responsibility, because if you have universal human values inculcated in it, in yourself, then I'm sure gender studies and social responsibilities will follow. And that is for the students to learn. And for teachers, it would be ideal if we can have a B.Ed course, like a 1 year, need not be full time, because we are already spending 5 years of architecture, then we have to practice and then come back to school for teaching. And we have a dearth of teachers now. So it could be an online crash course or some refresher courses, which would educate the old and new teachers to take up the challenge and go further ahead. Again, reminded of what Pushkar sir said, that there are many teachers who are reluctant. I would say that there are equally good number of teachers who are taking this as a challenge to see how the change can, what all change can we bring into education. And we know that our curriculum is mostly outcome based. So there are 3 things that we need to teach our student: knowledge, skill, and attitude. But after teaching, we need to know what do we want our students to have or able to do. Because the whole question is not whether they have acquired the knowledge, whether they have acquired the ability to do the thing. Even if it is product design or some craft design or even architecture, whether they have acquired the ability to do, because it's all about doing a job. And how can we best help our students achieve it? That should be the focus. And how can we measure whether the student has achieved that ability to do it? And if there is a gap, we need to fill it. And again, I conclude not stating the apprehensions of NEP 2020, which has already been discussed by both the stalwarts. It's only a matter of a point which I want to discuss. Again, going back to the story of the horse, sometimes the chain that prevent us from being free are just mental. They're not physical. And also with the understanding, again, taking a clue from what SRIVATHSAN sir said, one size does not fit all. So one university or one cluster of colleges cannot adopt the same curriculum that is adopted in another part of the country. So we have to design tailor-made curriculum to suit our regional expertise, our regional context. At the same time, look at the minimum standards given by Council of Architecture as well as other international bodies, because our students may also leave the country to explore greener pastures. So they should not be a misfit in that country. They should be a proper fit in that country. So it should be region specific. At the same time, looking at what the minimum standards prescribed by the authorities from day to day. I conclude by this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. BINUMOL. Very interesting. 2 observations come out of it. You know, centuries ago and even today, there is something called Freemasonry. There are Freemasons. And you know, they had to start from an entered apprentice to a fellow craftsman to a master mason.
Exactly.
Who are literally architects, and it took them a whole lifetime to become that.
Yeah.
So I think our profession has that depth in it. And another interesting point that you made and Professor Pushkar made, that we have to now look at input based rather than outcome based. The whole education thing. Interesting. Before
It
I
is
hand over,
other way around. It is other way around.
It should be outcome
you
based.
don't want to be input based. You want it to be outcome based. No, please, I'm ready to open up that.
Yes,
no,
yes.
outcome based. All right. So now I invite all the three of you and I hand over the mic to our principal, Sapna. Sapna, over to you for the questions and the next section.
Thank you thank you Rao sir, first of all, and thank you to all the presenters for the very informative presentations. We had a long list of questions which we had taken while the participants registered. Most of these questions have been answered when the three of you did your presentations, but there are some that I would like to put out onto you. One would be, what would be the timeline for the whole system to convert to NEP? Srivatsan sir, can you take this question?
The two, as Pushkar had observed, the draft speaks far more clearly than the final draft. So the two timelines, 2030 and 2040. There are two timelines. So 2030 is by which most of the changes would come, but 2040 is when everything would be in place, is what is anticipated. Okay. But to begin with, from 2020, the affiliation idea would go. But these, except for this 2030, the other numbers are not present in the final draft.
Now, the question I ask is on behalf of myself. What would the effect of this NEP be on standalone institutions like us, and what would be the way forward for standalone institutions like Pushkar sir?
See, there is no absolute clarity on this. They're talking about either you expanding to offer multiple courses which are associated, or you cluster with other institutions, you join hand with other institutions to create a cluster of institutions which will offer that multidisciplinary or multiple number of options, which may be across the institutions. Like your architecture institution, you may tie up with some engineering institution or some fine arts or performing arts institution, and together you can offer possibilities of different things, or you can choose to keep on adding the courses which are closer to you. Maybe you can add design, you can have technology courses, and maybe some vocational courses, some skill-based courses, to ultimately make it an institution which is offering many options which are related only to building industry. Okay. And maybe something associated with building industry. These are the two options that I can see, but maybe Dr. Srivatsan or Dr. BINUMOL can throw more light on this.
Thank you,
I don't know.
There's another question from Pratik Sudhakaran. It says, what is exactly what is it exactly that affiliated colleges need to do right away? I think that you have answered. Also, how do standalone autonomous colleges get research funding and research grants in future? Anyone, whoever, Srivatsan sir?
Yeah.
See, this is a very brief document. So the details of this rollout has to be, we'll have to await. Okay. What it looks to me, because a draft is far more detailed, so I'm just making some connections between the draft and the final report. First, I'm saying universities will have to first respond to these colleges. There's already affiliating. So what is their roadmap towards this policy? Okay. One. Two, I think the draft was a little more clear where they said there will be only independent colleges, only autonomous colleges. Then we will take care of the existing universities which are affiliating. What it means is basically that colleges would quickly put a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan where they would identify what is their roadmap to either grow big, as Pushkar just explained, or it would sort of become a constituent college of a university.
Okay.
You can become a constituent because this concept exists. So there is a university. You're not an affiliated college, but you're a constituent in a single campus. So a constituent college could be in different places.
Okay. Okay.
So you sort of work with the university. So there are two parallel developments that can happen. One, the university puts its own roadmap, and two, there will be strategic ground adjustments where universities would come together, and probably the more resourceful and sort of a leader would set that university, and things will be constituent colleges.
Okay.
And the NRF funding and all is yet to come out. I hope it will be accessible to, as promised in the NEP, it will be accessible to private colleges.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just add one more point to this? See, in research funding, name of a college, everything works out, but at times you find that even the research proposal is important. So it can also be given to individual members with a good research proposal, need not be because of the name of the school or the college. So, because like in foreign countries, we approach them with a research project, and if they like it, they can fund our project. So there could be twinning of works between two different countries, or even within our state itself or within our country itself, we can go for funded projects, provided the market knows that your project is going to be of benefit for the market, for the society.
There is one more question. It says the architecture coursework makes no provision to direct a student for teaching. In addition, Indian academic institutions don't have the rigor of Western academic research that requires architects to keep themselves updated. What then are ideas to sort these two disparities out? Ma'am, can you take this?
That's quite a long question and a complicated one. See, one thing is that we should not compare ourselves with other countries. If you look at our traditional knowledge systems, we were much ahead of many of the other countries that we are now boasting about. Somewhere in the line, maybe you would call me an anti-Britisher. Because of the colonization, we have lost our vigor of knowing and doing things. So we have to pick up from there, where we have to understand our own necessity, our own development, and most of the intellectuals of our country are working abroad. So they have the best of the solutions there, and we don't have that good solutions here. I hope I have not answered the question. Maybe Pushkar sir or SRIVATHSAN sir can add to this.
You know, my view on this is this. It's a very practical question. The question being, do teachers require training or not? Okay, either, teachers, architecture teachers. See, one thing about professional education, there is no training for professional education teaching. Okay, so broadly, professional education has been oriented towards practice. Architecture is not an exception. Okay, unlike in the Western education, which is far more developed in the sense because of their institutional arrangement and so on. Here, there are two kinds of teachers that will emerge. People who will teach design anchored in practice, etc., and people who are anchored in research and who will probably lead some research projects and so on. And teaching is also like a practice. You need a certain level of training. Okay, so in many institutions, slowly, the requirements are being made that you should have a certain kind of teaching experience as an assistant, teaching assistant, research assistant, etc. before we go. Okay, some recommend some kind of a training in as a degree as B.Ed or something like that. I'm not so sure about it, because what matters is a sort of an embedded training. It's not it's not a theoretical training. It's an embedded training, as you would train in a professional office. So the training in terms of teaching will be slightly different. Second problem with the architectural field is architectural research is at its lowest point. Yeah, so there are not many researchers, and the quality of research is also not great. So there is also at the other end, the production and the expansion of the knowledge base through research also requires a lot of effort.
Sapna,
Yes, sir.
I have one question on this. It's actually a thought. You know, all over the world, this is to all the panelists, all over the world today, people are talking of centers for higher learning and research, not affiliated to institutions, not offering any degrees, but they call themselves centers for higher learning and research. That means at any age, any time, you can come and pursue some matters of interest. And how come and world over, it's now becoming very, very common. Whether you look at Bell Labs or Swaminathan Foundation in India, how come nowhere in the NEP or anywhere do they talk about this higher learning? Are we too early for it? Just a thought,
No, I will just try to answer this, plus whatever add to what the other two panelists have said. One is, I was associated with NIASA, and NIASA was formulated with this in mind, that is the place for higher learning and research for architects and teachers. In fact, it is accepted fact, like what SRIVATHSAN sir has said, that for professional courses and technical courses, the need for training the teacher was not felt. Sometime long back, technical courses, people felt it, and they started what is today called NITTR, or previously it was called Technical Teachers Training Institution. But based on their experiences, Council wanted to formulate a similar institute for architecture, and the roadmap for NIASA was like that it will start with small courses. It was a learning phase. When I was heading the NIASA, it was a learning phase to find out what is happening in different colleges over the country, what are the needs of the teachers, and therefore how the NIASA should go ahead as far as the teacher training is concerned. I don't know what has happened next, whether why it has stopped from offering the courses which will be slightly longer duration and trying to train the teachers in what is at least what is called education technology, how to teach, how to evaluate, and these basic things which are taught in a B.Ed college. And architects who are in the teaching, they learn it very hard way through experimentation and their own efforts. And also NIASA was supposed to be a platform where you can take up the research projects from industry, from community, from government, and provide a base where in detail research could be formulated. At that time, even Dr. SRIVATHSAN also had given certain inputs as to how NIASA can go ahead. But unfortunately, due to many happenings in council, that has not come up. But the institution is still there, and let's hope that with the new thrust, it takes up these issues and goes ahead. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir.
Professor Sapna,
Yeah.
back to you. You can, I think, now propose vote of thanks.
Yes,
Or
sir.
you got more questions? I leave it to you.
Yes,
I
sir.
thank the panelists for giving me the opportunity to moderate, interact with them. It's all back to you, Professor Sapna.
On behalf of the management, staff and students of Mysore School of Architecture, I take the opportunity to thank all our three speakers. SRIVATHSAN sir, with your thorough understanding of the NEP, you've explained to us the various facets of it. PUSHKAR sir, the minimum standards of architectural education 2020. Very clearly you have explained to us how it was drafted and how it is going to affect the future, or what could be the probable changes. And BINUMOL Tom, ma'am, your positive way of looking at things and how any change can be looked in a very positive manner is something that was really eye-opening, and it was very good to hear. Thank you all for taking time off your regular schedules and preparing for our webinar. And I would like to thank all our participants who have registered. I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed hosting it for you. Thank you all.
We are also thankful for giving this opportunity to express ourselves on this platform.
The pleasure was ours. I mean, you all
thank you. The pleasure was all ours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
that is what is appreciated. Your immediate thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I would also like to thank the two people who were coordinating from our faculty end, Professor Priyanka and Professor Sandeep. Without their background involvement, this could not have been possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Thank you all. Good day.
Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.